Hello, I'm Iona Ballantyne and this is the Scottish Football Podcast. All the news, views and analysis you need on Wednesday the 29th of October. And we've got quite the night to look forward to.
And it would be good to keep the momentum now. And for this we have to do a lot of things right against opponent with good weapons.
Danny Rule's Rangers face a tricky trip to face third place Hibs. Meanwhile, the league leaders face an awkward away trip of their own.
Here goes Shankland, it will be a right-footed penalty, which is converted beautifully. And Heart of Midlothian, their fans are dreaming here.
And Derek McInnes back up a win over Celtic against St Mirren. And there's a familiar face back in the dugout for Celtic.
There's going to be concerns about that. He's 73 now, Martin. He's not managed for so long. Football's completely different from when Martin was in charge of Celtic last time.
We'll preview all the Premiership action.
The Scottish Football Podcast from BBC Sports Scotland.
Well, joining me this morning, Herald football writer at large, Stephen McGowan. Stephen, could you have imagined the magnitude of stories you'd be covering at this point in the season?
Yeah, I just wish they would stop breaking at 10 o'clock at night, Iona, to be honest with you. It seems as if it's the law in Scottish football that when you sack a manager, you have to do it at 9:45, which isn't great from a deadline point of view. Maybe that's the idea for these clubs, to be honest. But I mean, yeah, there's never a dull moment in Scottish football. Do
you know, Stephen, that was one of my first thoughts when the news broke. At the time, I was thinking all of the papers, just how difficult that would have been at that time.
Well, it was particularly difficult for me because I've been out at a very long lunch where liquid had been imbibed. So it was like the good old days of Scottish newspapers again. It was... these things are sent to testers, but in the 24-hour news cycle, that's not uncommon these days.
Well, a great effort, Stephen. Also joining us this morning, former Hearts and Dundee United manager Robbie Neilson. Robbie, not even really 2 days to digest the madness.
Yeah, it was, as Stephen said, it was a crazy one. We're an hour ahead here, and I was getting texts in left, right and centre, and then coming in the following morning, even the guys in Belgium were all speaking about it as well. So it's a very, very big story what's been going on in Scotland.
Wow, it is quite incredible. And as we've just kind of been speaking about, let's start with Celtic. And we had quite the news on Monday night, Stephen. It's quite incredible just how quickly relations seem to collapse.
Well, it's been brewing for quite some time, Iona. I think really the apex of it goes back to the transfer window when Brendan Rodgers, I think, felt very strongly that Celtic should continue to move forward. I think the board of directors felt that he had a pretty expensively assembled squad and he should be doing better with the squad that he had. I think the two parties wanted the same thing, they just differed in how to get there. I mean, Rodgers felt that they should continue signing quality expensive players. I think the board wanted to do it following their usual model of buying low and selling high. And it became a kind of ideological struggle, if you like. They lost to Kairat Almaty. And I think while the fans initially were, and still are, extremely anti-board, I think they came to the conclusion as well that Rodgers wasn't getting the best out of the squad. And I think you have to go back some time to remember the last time that Celtic won a big game under Rodgers. So I think opinion began to swing slightly towards the end. Supporters began to take more of a kind of nuanced view of it. And essentially by the end, I think it got to the point where relations were so glacial that probably it was in Celtic's interest that they did part company, without attributing any blame to Brendan Rodgers, because I think he was harshly dealt with in the end. But I think it was probably right that they parted way in order to try and save the season after going 8 points behind Hearts.
There's a fans' view piece on the BBC Sport website, Robbie. I saw a comment from a Jack who said it's like being a child with your parents arguing and you're not exactly sure who's at fault, not yet anyway. I mean, when you're a manager, what can you do when relations with the board become strained?
Yeah, I think, I agree with Stephen actually on it. I think it had got to the point where it's probably best that they split, to be honest with you. I think that that relationship between the manager, the CEO and then the ownership is the most important within the club. And that has to be strong. As soon as that breaks, if it breaks to a point where it seemed to be Celtic, then I don't think it was ever going to get back together. And I think it was probably the best decision for everyone, although it was probably harshly done and quickly done. But sometimes these are the best ways to do it, rather than dragging it out for a period of 3-4 months. Initially I'd thought that Brendan would probably stay to the end of the season, but I think the relationship had broken down that much that I think it probably was the right decision at the right time for both sides.
Stephen, how does Dermot Desmond get the fans back on side now?
Well, I think he probably needs to stop making statements which make the situation worse. I think that was probably the regrettable point of it, and the needless point of it from Celtic was that I think if they just released the initial statement saying Brendan Rodgers is gone, we wish him all the best, we now look for a permanent manager, I think that would have been at least said soon as mended. I think what then happened was a slightly unedifying statement from the controlling shareholder, not the majority shareholder, the controlling shareholder. He's got 34%, although I think it's pretty obvious now that he is the main man. He's the one who makes all the decisions. And I had that ironic sign-off where he said that no one man is bigger than the club, but actually from where we're sitting at the moment, it looks as if one man is making all the decisions and dictating almost everything. So, there's a slight irony in that, I suspect. But I think in terms of getting fans back on board, he has to go and get a manager who brings some fresh thinking, some innovative ideas, and just takes away some of the staleness which seems to be enveloping the club from the boardroom to the technical area and in fact to the team now as well, where they look leggy and they just don't look quite at it. So, everything is dictated by results on the pitch ultimately.
Well, Robbie, Martin O'Neill back in the dugout for Celtic is probably a name that no one really expected to hear. Do you think he or Sean Maloney could be serious contenders for this job?
I would be very surprised, I wonder if they were, to be honest. I think Martin's probably doing it just to cover the ship for a little while. Obviously he's got a huge history with Celtic. I think he knows the ownership very well as well, and it just gives them a little bit of time and a little bit of breathing space as well, where they've got an experienced manager in there with an experienced assistant that can cover for whatever it takes, 2, 3, 4 weeks until they get the right guy in. Obviously a massive game at the weekend, massive game tonight, but also at the weekend with the semi-final. So they needed somebody that's got that experience just to take the heat off them until they can get the right guy in.
Stephen, who is the right type of person for this job now?
I think in an interview with TalkSport on his way up to Glasgow, Martin O'Neill more or less gave away the profile they're looking for. He said that they're looking for a younger manager who has a proven track record. Clearly the man for the job is sitting with us in this call right now, based on that remit. But no, I mean, I certainly think that they are looking at Ipswich Town's Kieran McKenna. I think there are going to be obvious financial issues there in terms of suggestions are he's got a £5 million salary, one of the highest paid managers in England after signing a new deal. So I think even in terms of compensation, that might be a really difficult, impossible deal to do. Who knows? But depends how far they're willing to push the boat out. Obvious candidates going into the same category would be Robbie Keane, who's managing at Ferencvaros, maybe even Craig Bellamy of Wales. But I mean, that's all to be dictated. I think what they have done by putting Martin O'Neill and Sean Maloney is they've bought themselves some time. They've bought themselves some breathing space, and they'll certainly look to get through to the next international break, you would imagine, and then see if they can get something done permanently that can reinvigorate a season which is in serious danger of falling off the rails.
Ange is also a name that's been linked. Robbie, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm not surprised, to be honest with you. Obviously Ange had a fantastic period when he was up in Scotland. And one of the key things, like Stephen spoke about there, a lot of the guys that are getting quoted at clubs at the moment, and at big clubs, and usually when you're at a big club, you've got a big buyout. So Ange will be free at the moment, and I can see that one, but I would be slightly surprised. I think they'll look elsewhere for this one. Obviously Kieran McKenna is one that everyone's speaking about. I think that it might be the time for him to go. He's sitting 12th in the Championship at the moment. He had a fantastic couple of years, so it might work out for both parties on that one. But there's a number of managers out there that will be looking at that job because it's a fantastic opportunity. I would expect the board to spend big in January. So if you're coming in as a manager, first of all, you want to look at the squad. I think it's a good squad, but I think there'll be money getting spent. So I think there'll be loads and loads of people putting their CV in and some top managers.
I think that's an interesting point Robbie makes there, which is that obviously there was concerns about Celtic having 77 million in the bank and not spending it in the summer. Well, I think if you're looking back now with hindsight at the events at that time, you would think maybe that was more to do with the identity of the manager than anything else. So you wonder if a new manager will just free up some funds to really go and have a go at it come January.
Mm-hmm. Well, they'd certainly be hoping so. And I mean, the thing is, with everything that's going on off the pitch, the football does continue tonight. Celtic host Falkirk, Stephen. They're missing key players, kind of lacking in confidence. How do you expect a game like this to go?
Well, Falkirk have bounced back, haven't they? I mean, they've had a couple of good wins. I thought they were a bit fortunate against Dundee at the weekend, where I felt they had a very fortuitous penalty call which went against Dundee, which would have made it 2-0. But, they've had a couple of good wins, Motherwell and Dundee, and they have, John McGowan plays football the way he plays it. He doesn't do the low block, the 11 men behind the ball by and large. I think they'll be a bit more pragmatic. But for Celtic, every game is fraught with difficulty these days. I think the low block games are the worst ones for them. They'll probably welcome playing a team who might try and come out a little bit. Falkirk can cause them problems defensively when you look at Colby Donovan, Dane Murray. You wonder if Austin Trusty will come back in. So I don't think there's any game for Celtic now which they will go into with relish, because they are all fraught with extreme difficulty.
Robbie, do you think John McGlynn will come into this one with confidence? He must be quite happy with how things are going at the moment.
Yeah, I think that I think that the Falkirk players, they went there last season and did fantastically well in the Cup. And played some unbelievable football. I think at that point Brendan Rodgers said it was one of the best performances he'd seen at Celtic Park from an opposition team. So, they play fantastic football. John likes the 4-2-3-1, 4-3-3 style, and I don't expect him to change. I think he'll go there and see it as an opportunity to show what Falkirk are about, but also try and get a result. And like Stephen was talking about there, I just feel that Celtic at the moment, they don't have that, the eliminators within the team that can go by people, that can take people on. Jota's a massive loss from that aspect. So I think it'll be a real tough game, but a great game for Falkirk.
Well, there's a huge game at Easter Road tonight as Hibernian host Rangers. Danny Rowell won his first league game against Kilmarnock at the weekend. Stephen, what changes did you notice in that Rangers side?
I just think there's more intensity about them. I think and that's something that really is a characteristic, a trademark of Danny Rowell's teams. He's coming across well. He's making a good first impression. He's removing some of the toxicity that was around the situation before, I think, just with the way he's conducting himself. And, he got a goal out of Yusuf Chermiti, he got a goal out of Danilo, so, he's already doing things which the previous manager couldn't do. He got a home win, but this is a major test against Hibs away. I mean, Hibs really have, since the Edinburgh derby, bounced back with a couple of good results. They've looked impressive. I thought they were really impressive at Pittodrie at the weekend. So I think this will be seen as the first real staging point test for Danny Rowell, and because the one thing that is difficult for him to eliminate in the short term is poor defending, and that's been a big problem for Rangers of late. So I think Hibs will test him to the absolute max.
It is very early on, Robbie, but do you think he's kind of won the fans over with the kind of small things that he's been doing? Like, he's spoken about the suit. He went over to speak to the fans after the defeat in Brann. Do you think that's kind of changed how they felt beforehand?
Yeah, I think it's he's been in a position when he came in that Rangers were at a very low point. So coming in, anything that brings energy and positivity is going to improve the club and the team. And I think he's managed to do that. When you look at these previous clubs, he's always had a good relationship with the fans. And I think that's what Rangers needed at that point. So yeah, I think he's done extremely well so far. But Stephen says tonight's a big test. I think that's a real tough place to go, and I think that'll be the big game this midweek for everyone to watch.
Stephen, Hibs will be a whole different proposition to Killie. They probably should have scored more against Aberdeen, would you say?
Oh yeah. I thought they were really unlucky with that Josh Campbell goal getting ruled out. I mean, they could easily have scored 4 at Aberdeen. That raises questions for Aberdeen, obviously, which are a bit concerning. But they've got their mojo back. I think it's really good for Hibs to see Thibaut Clichy beginning to score goals. He looks really lively. Obviously, the record signings. Not often that a team out of Celtic at Rangers spends, what was a reported £1 million on a striker. So I think they had to get a return from him, and he's beginning to look the part. And that's at a time where Kieran Bowie's scoring fewer goals, so his timing is good, and he will be a real handful for the Rangers defence.
And for Hibs, I mean, they're certainly on form just now, kind of sitting third in the table, and they did maybe have a bit more of a difficult start playing in Europe. We know what that can do to teams in Scotland, but things are going well.
Yeah, they've kind of slowly moved back up the table. I think, like you spoke about there with regards to European football, it's always difficult at the start of the season. I think, it's staying in the hunt at that point within the league, and now obviously they've moved out of that, and it's a case of now pushing up, and they're sitting third in the league now. So it's David Gray will be delighted the way things are going. They've got a real excitement about the team. Similar to Hearts, and they've got goals from a lot of different areas. They look solid. So I think again, it'll be a big night for them. Can they turn over one of the old firm? Hearts have managed to do it at the weekend there. Can they do it as well? And a wee swing in where the power in Scottish football is for a period.
Well, let's now turn our attention to the league leaders, Hearts. Stephen, Derek McInnes just quietly and happily getting on with business at the top of the table.
Absolutely. But there's a new kind of pressure now, isn't there? Because initially they started the season as the hunter, and now they're the hunted. That Celtic game really took it to a new level, because I think before then there was an extreme reluctance in a lot of quarters to take Hearts seriously. But that's the first time since certainly the Romanov era and George Burley, when the Hearts have been some 8 points ahead in the league. Now we know what happened in that era, but this is a different Hearts. This is a different stable ownership model. I think they have got a strong pool of players. I think there might be a willingness, if need be, to go in January and just do one or two little things. They're bringing a Kazakhstani winger anyway. So, funny enough, even Martin O'Neill has said that he thinks Hearts have got a real chance this season, which was quite ironic given where they ended up 24 hours later. So, yeah, we're getting to the point now where people having to talk about Hearts seriously. But as I say, that brings its own unique pressure, doesn't it? And it's something I've not really been in before, so it's a new challenge for them.
Well, that's the thing, because Paisley can be a tricky place for teams to visit, Robbie. But, Hearts must just be overflowing with confidence going into that one.
Yeah, I think, these are the games that dictate whether you can go and challenge and win a title. I think the game at the weekend there, they kind of take care of themselves because of the build-up, and everyone's ready for it, and it's a massive game. I think when you go away, especially to St Mirren, which is a very, very difficult place to go and play, I think these are the games that will dictate. It tells you where you are as a team, because St Mirren will be up for it. They'll be looking at it. League leaders coming to town, chance to turn them over. Hearts have to go there and win these games. That's it. If you're going to sustain a challenge and win a title, you have to go away to St Mirren, you have to go away to Kilmarnock, you have to go away to Pittodrie, all these different venues, and you have to win games. So I think this will probably be a bigger challenge than the weekend was, because they have to get up for the game, and they, as Stephen says, they are now the hunted.
It's interesting though, because there's St Mirren have got a situation now, haven't they? Because they've been so used to being top six for so long now, and then they've dropped into an unfamiliar zone, and they're not really scoring goals. I think they've scored something like 6 goals in 9 games. So yeah, they're going to be really pumped up for this, and that brings its own challenge.
Well, just talking about St Mirren, like you say, can we expect to see more from them now? What's kind of not quite been clicking this season?
Well, I think expectations are so high nowadays, and especially in Scottish football. But with St Mirren, we kind of, we expect them to be top 6 because Stephen's done such a fantastic job. But they're having a little bit of dip. They're not scoring as many goals, but they're still pretty defensively strong. They've got a good squad, and they've got a very, very good manager. So I would expect them to pick back up again. But with the teams that you've got in that top 6, there's always really only 1 or 2 spaces left for the so-called not top teams within the league. So, I think it's just that little period where they're maybe not clicking the way they have in the last couple of years, but it's probably because we just expect Stephen to produce almost miracles every season.
Well, if we look at Aberdeen, they're away to Kilmarnock, and the fans very unhappy at the manner of the defeats to AEK and Hibs. Do you think Jimmy Tillene's position is under threat, Stephen?
It's funny, I was up seeing Stephen Paisley in Dundee a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about this, about how there's this black cloud in Scottish football that just zigzags around the country. One week it's in Glasgow, next week it's in Edinburgh, then it moves up to Aberdeen. And it looked like Jimmy Tillene had taken that away, because, after that Motherwell defeat, he got a couple of he changed his formation, got a couple of better performances and results. And then, of course, they go to Athens and the heavens open again, and they lose 6 goals. And that performance at the weekend, I think, against Hibs was actually quite alarming. because they were cut open time and again. And I think there's a real dilemma for them now, because I think there's this feeling amongst Aberdeen people that they owe this debt of gratitude to Jimmy Tilleen for the Scottish Cup. But that can't last forever. It can't last forever. At some point, someone will actually have to say, well, thank you, Jimmy, it was a magnificent day. But, you know, it's just a question of how long is a piece of string, really? Because I certainly think you have to be beginning to ask some pretty awkward questions there, I think.
Is he almost flying under the radar a wee bit, certainly in the press, because of what's been going on in Glasgow?
Yeah, I think that, as Stephen spoke about there, you know, there's always someone under pressure. But I think that, you know, we spoke about it earlier on as well, that European football can have a big detriment on teams' league performance when they don't have a big squad, or maybe not had that experience. I always believed that you needed 3 or 4 seasons on the bounce in Europe for the players to get used to it. So when you go away to like Athens, you have the high of going there and playing these games, and then the low of sometimes taking a bit of a beating, and then you have to come back at the weekend. You're playing against a team who's had all week to prepare, and you have to try and get back up again. It can be very, very difficult. So sometimes getting into Europe financially it's good for the club, but actually in the longer term of that season, it can be difficult for the league position. So obviously with a new sporting director coming in, I think Jimmy and him will need to build a relationship together, you know, and it will give him a bit of time to do that. And potentially the new sporting director has to come in and look at what's going on in the background with the squad, with the manager, the relationship. So, you know, I think every manager's under pressure, but I think that might give Jimmy a little bit more time.
Mm-hmm. It will be an interesting one at Rugby Park, because Kilmarnock have been decent this season, apart from the past couple of games, which were tough for them.
I think the problem with Kilmarnock that was alarming at the weekend at Ibrox was the defending, and they've got a bit of a goalkeeping situation as well. You know, they are. I think Stuart Kettlewell was incredibly frustrated with a couple of the goals they lost, and that's not really been like them in recent times, you know. And I think they made a really good enterprise and bright start to the season, but yeah, they've just fallen a wee bit below their standards in the last game or two and just need to get it back again. But you know, I think Stuart's made a terrific start there. I think they'll be okay, but they need to cut out some of the mistakes, definitely.
Just moving on, Dundee United go to Motherwell after a win against St Mirren that wasn't quite the prettiest, but Jim Goodwin, do you think he'll be happy with how things are in the league just now, Robbie?
Yeah, I think he will. You know, again, Jim's kind of, as he always seemed to do, is like they kind of fly under the radar and they get themselves into really good positions in the league. You know, they're sitting 4th at the moment, you know, which is, you know, a great position for them. I think it's a tough game down at Motherwell. You know, I think it's you know, although Motherwell have kind of been a bit up and down this season, I think they play some fantastic football at times, but they also, you know, are conceding goals, you know, they'll be trying to stop. But yeah, I think that Jim's done a great job over the last couple of seasons, and similar to kind of Stephen at St Mirren, we kind of just expect it every year from him, you know, and he keeps producing, which is a good thing to have.
Well, Motherwell, they've picked up plaudits rather than points so far this season. But Stephen, do you think that victory over Livingston can kind of kickstart their season now?
It's funny, I was talking to a Motherwell fan the other day, you know, and they're getting quite cocky about it all, in terms of, like, you know, they're becoming footballing purists now. You know, if you look back at Motherwell teams of the past, you would expect a slightly more direct approach, whereas now they're silky soccer, passing the ball around, and I think the fans are absolutely loving it. And no wonder, you know, I think it's brilliant for Mascot, because, I mean, we very rarely see that these days. Actually, we talk about Stephen Robinson, and to his immense credit, he's going to set the template for what you think is deemed success in the Scottish Premier League. If you're not one of the absolute top clubs, you know, just being quite direct, organised, disciplined, and what have you. Whereas actually Motherwell are doing things very differently, and they're getting a bit of success with it. So, I mean, need more wins, of course. Less draws, more wins. But yeah, I think it's really good for the league what's happening there, I have to say.
We're certainly keeping things entertaining. That is all we've got time for this morning. Many thanks to Stephen McGowan and Robbie Neilson, and thank you for listening. Now remember, we're here with new episodes of the Scottish Football Podcast bright and early every day, so to make sure you don't miss out, subscribe on BBC Sounds and have push notifications turned on in your phone. There really is never a dull moment in Scottish football. We'll be back tomorrow morning with plenty more. Goodbye.
For everything you need to know about your team this season, download the BBC Sport app. All the latest news, goal updates, stats and scores, and insight and analysis. Just select your club to get the biggest stories and best content at your fingertips. What a result. Download the BBC Sport app for everything you need to know about your team this season.